Good evening and welcome to APTN National News Weekend. I'm Brittany Hobson. This week, the Canada Energy Regulator released its 2020 energy future projections. And under one scenario, the Keystone and Transmountain Pipelines might not be necessary. Chris Stewart gets the reaction from some of the Indigenous groups that want a stake in those pipelines.
The report by the Canada Energy Regulator projects the country's energy usage until the year 2050. There are two main paths that they are projecting. One path, called the reference scenario, assumes that there are no more environmental policies put in place and oil demand continues to increase. The second is called the evolving scenario. This was calculated with more climate policies introduced, such as additional carbon taxes and improved technology from the oil sector. If the country follows the evolving scenario, oil demand peaks in the year 2039. This chart shown here shows that once the Enbridge Line 3 is fully operational, there could be enough pipeline capacity to carry all the oil needed, and the Keystone and Transmountain Pipelines would not be needed. Darren Christie is the chief economist for the Canada Energy Regulator.
In the evolving scenario, which is the one where we see a continued pace of action on climate change and improving technology in the area of low carbon tech, you do see some years where there's a significant amount of capacity over and above what would move out of that area.
In the projected reference scenario, with the current environmental policies and continued oil demand, then both the Keystone and Transmountain Pipelines would be needed to meet demand. Stephen Buffalo is the CEO of the Indian Resource Council. The council advocates for independently, indigenously owned oil ventures. He says, even after this report, he recommends purchasing the Transmountain Pipeline.
You know, we have to educate ourselves more. We have to understand what pipelines are and the regulations that are associated here in Canada. You know, in my view, it's the safest way to move this natural resource. And there is a world demand.
Chief Michael Laburde is one of the heads of the Western Indigenous Pipeline Group. The group represents several Indigenous nations that want a stake in the Transmountain Pipeline. He says the demand is there today and down the road for Alberta oil.
Today we're building the pipeline. We do have customers for Alberta oil once it gets to tidewater. And, you know, if we want to get to zero, I'm a big fan of reducing pollution. Heck yeah, let's reduce the heck out of pollution. However, you know, our oil seems to be a lot cleaner than what's being currently used in the markets. There should be a larger demand, a higher demand for cleaner Canadian oil.
He says this report will not stop his group from investing in the Transmountain Pipeline.
You tell them, I'll take it off their hands. Sell it to me. Sell it to me. That's your headline. Sell it to me. If it's not necessary, sell it to me. I will take that lemon off the Canadian taxpayers' hands.
The report says that even with the best case evolving scenario in 2050, 2/3 of Canada's energy will still come from oil. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
On Thursday, 1492 Landback Lane announced that they are appealing the Ontario Superior Court order for injunctions on their camps. For over 4 months, activists from Six Nations have occupied a site. It's being pegged for development on their unceded land. The Six Nations elected council signed off on the development in 2019, but the traditional Haudenosaunee government supports 1492 Landback Lane. In a prepared statement, spokesperson Skylar Williams contests that his arguments and evidence were wrongly thrown out by the Ontario judge.
We chose to engage in a process that is not our own, and to try and move it forward. And so for us, the issue of the land here is still before the courts, and it certainly needs to come to a nation-to-nation discussions, some actual dialogue with our community, because like right now, this is like what has been happening for the last 100 years now is absolutely infuriating for me and for many people from Six Nations.
women are facing higher rates of violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. A national survey found 1 in 5 Indigenous women had experienced physical or psychological violence during the first 3 months of the pandemic. Sarah Connors reports.
Ketsia Hood-McLennan is the acting executive director of the Yukon Women's Transition Home, a shelter that's used mostly by Indigenous women. When the pandemic first hit the Yukon in March, Hood-McLennan says she saw a noticeable drop in visitors.
It was eerie because we had nobody. Like usually we're not always full, but we always have people. And all of a sudden in March, we had 1 woman in the shelter and no kids.
Hood-McLennan says for some women, the message to stay home meant being trapped with their abuser.
But then all of a sudden, he's there 24/7 or she's there 24/7. So there's no time you can call the shelter. If you call, he'll be there.
Earlier this year, the Native Women's Association of Canada surveyed 250 Indigenous women to see how they were being affected by COVID-19. What they found was a spike in the number of violent incidents, and that 1 in 5 women reported they had been a victim of either physical or psychological violence during the first 3 months of the pandemic. Cricket Wilder works at the Dawson Women's Shelter in Dawson City. She says some women using the shelter say they're experiencing more violence from their partners because of added stress caused by the pandemic, like income loss and job insecurity.
I've seen women who are already accessing our space for drop-in services of laundry and showers, telling us, feeling more comfortable telling us about the abuse and telling us that the abuse got worse because of COVID.
Wilder says with Indigenous women 3.5 times more likely to experience violence than non-Indigenous women, the virus has put more strain on an already vulnerable population.
Then when you add COVID on top of that, there becomes some really high risk factors, not being able to reach out, not being able to have those social connections.
Now she wants to see systemic change in the government, like a national childcare strategy, basic income, and affordable housing for women fleeing violence.
So that is my #1 call, is that the federal government commit to a federal strategy on ending gender-based violence. And that federal strategy looks like some really nuts and bolts things that don't seem really snazzy or full of glitter.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Fred Sasakamoose was a pioneer for the game of hockey, and his death on Tuesday was felt by many. With more, here's Daryl Stranger on the impact he had and the legacy he leaves behind.
Thank everyone for everything you've done.
The death of Fred Sasakamoose from COVID-19 struck a chord, and many people took to social media to express their condolences. NHL teams, former players, politicians all expressed their grief for one of the first Indigenous players in NHL history. Steve Hogle is the former Saskatoon Blades president and was a friend of Sasakamoose.
Wherever I went with him, or if I was having a coffee with him, people would come up and talk to him, and you just had to love the way he rolled. And he always put others first. And even though he had led this legendary life and had created such an amazing history, he was always about looking forward and thinking about that younger generation and taking care of the kids. So he sets a wonderful example for us and will forevermore.
Sasakamoose was a residential school survivor who grew up in Atakakoop Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. He made his NHL debut November the 20th, 1953, against the Boston Bruins as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. After hockey, he started a national hockey championship to allow Indigenous hockey athletes to showcase their talents. He also became a band counselor of his home Atakakoop Cree Nation, serving many years and spent 6 years as chief. In 2017, Sasakamoose was invested in the Order of Canada, an honor that recognizes Canadian citizens for outstanding achievement, dedication to community, or service to the nation.
He believed in his culture, his language, his people. He believed in us getting along with non-native people, races around the world. He believed in a lot of good qualities of what we should be striving for.
He inspired many Indigenous hockey players after him, such as Manitoba's Reggie Leach, among others. Fred Sasakamoose was 86 years old. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Time for a quick break. Coming up, one community in the Northwest Territories is getting into the commercial fishing industry.
Well, it'll be good for the people give them work, opportunity to become a fisherman. It's good to pass it on to young generations.
Plus, a Saskatchewan First Nation is part owner of a new company doing CT scans and MRI imaging in that province.
A discussion and a vision to reality.
Welcome back. Queen's University and former Indigenous Affairs Minister Jane Philpott are announcing changes to their medical school admissions process to allow for more Black and Indigenous students. The Kingston-based university recognized an underrepresentation of Black and Indigenous students in their med program. The new initiative will allow 10 students direct entry into Queen's Medical School without having to write an entrance exam. Dr. Philpott is the Dean of Health Sciences at Queen's. She says the program is in response to obstacles faced by Black and Indigenous students.
We identify the very top students in grade 12. It has been highly popular, and we recognize that Indigenous students do face barriers in access to medical school, sometimes financial barriers, sometimes cultural, geography, getting to a place where it's communicating with a student who lives in a community in Northern Ontario, and even being able to get to a place where she could write the MCAT exam was going to be difficult for her. So someone like that, this would be a real opportunity for them to be able to address those barriers.
In other medical news, the James Smith Cree Nation in Saskatchewan is one of the owners of a new clinic that provides the latest technology in CT scan and MRI imaging. Priscilla Wolf has these details.
The National Medical Imaging Clinic and Education and Research Center opened its doors in Saskatoon, and the James Smith Cree Nation is one of the partners. Chief Wally Byrne says the clinic has been in the works for years.
4 years ago, it was a discussion and a vision to reality. Today, we are opening this MRI to the public and also the province.
Dragan Rasted, President and CEO of the James Smith Cree Nation National Medical Imaging Clinic and Education and Research Center, says this is the first time a medical imaging center has an Indigenous organization as a part owner. And the clinic will play an important role in education and research.
The importance of this type of project in the city of Saskatoon, we're standing in the middle of the city of Saskatoon in the Market Mall, is this type of clinic is something that is needed currently in our health system. It's a CT and MRI, two machines that provide the studies and important services to Saskatchewan Health Authority, and appropriate doctor radiologists can do their job. We can educate and work with researchers.
This clinic will help patients, educators, and researchers in Saskatchewan, as well as neighboring provinces, with the latest MR, CT, and X-ray technology, and will contribute to education and research.
This is a really big deal. Not only do you have expert people, state-of-the-art equipment to help individuals at the time of most need when they're sick, but this also can serve to prevent and heal.
The clinic's newly formed Education and Research Center will collaborate with educational institutions like Sask Polytechnic and the University of Saskatchewan province-wide to provide research and educational opportunities in the field of imaging. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
A new 2.2 megawatt solar farm is now generating power in northern Alberta. The project is owned by the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, the Mikisew Cree First Nation, and the Fort Chipewyan Métis Association. Nearly 6,000 solar panels will replace over 800,000 liters of fuel each year and provide 25% of the community's overall power. And Athabasca Chipewyan Chief Alan Adam says more renewable energy is coming.
We put it under budget, So there's revenue left over, and with the revenue that's left over, we're going to buy more panels and put them up, and eventually it's just going to continue to grow. It's not going to stop. So our main objective is to reduce the intake of fuel, maybe down to 25%, and flip it around 75% solar.
In July, we told you of a historic deal struck between Indigenous fishers and the government of the Northwest Territories. The agreement aims to see an increase in production with better financial returns for fishers. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs looks at how one community is building their own industry.
For the Dega-Gotne-Dene, being out on the mighty Mackenzie is second nature. Located west of Great Slave Lake, Jatikwe, Fort Providence, Northwest Territories, is home to roughly 700 people. Families here have been fishing since time immemorial, but now they're taking their skills to the next level, learning how to commercially harvest. After ice safety and equipment training, the real fun begins.
I didn't want to use the whitefish. I didn't want to waste on it, so I'm just practicing on the jack.
It's Loretta Elise's first time filleting.
I just took a chance and I just gave my name in last minute. I said not only guys could do fish, so I said I'll give it a try.
She's quick to catch on.
Oh, I could do my own at home if I ever could sit in it.
Over the last 2 years, the Dega-Gotne-Dene have been hard at work to restore the community fish plant with the goal of opening a store here by Christmas.
We will have fish in here, say selling fish Monday to Thursday, what's left Friday. Every Friday it'll be shipped to the fish plant. So at least there's income coming in after each week. Right?
Around 24 members took the training. Band counselor Michael Vandell says it's just the beginning.
Now the second step is training all the guys, on prepping the fish, not wasting the fish, get as much product out of the fish you can. The next one will be the food handling course.
Michael Landry is vying to become a commercial fisher.
Well, it'll be good for the people, give them work, opportunity to become a fisherman. It's good to pass it on to young generations.
And time is of the essence.
Try this one out.
This summer, Indigenous fishers group Tucho Cooperative struck a deal with the territorial government to begin selling NWT fish in NWT grocery stores. Dega plans to meet their commercial quota and will plow an ice road this winter to Deep Bay, an area close by traditionally used but being opened up for the first time in hopes trainees take their new skills professionally. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Fort Providence.
Coming up after the break, a First Nations artist is taking his work to new heights.
Get in front of the crowd. It's great to have an outlet, to push yourself into, whether it just be punching a punching bag or throwing stuff at a wall or playing music. Little things like those can really help a lot.
To northern Saskatchewan now, where a young man in Wollaston Lake has been keeping himself busy during this pandemic by playing guitar online. And as Priscilla Wolf tells us, he's also making a name for himself.
17-year-old Dylan Gadson-Larry hasn't let a disability set him back from pursuing music as a hobby and hopefully a career. He was born with one hand, and the teenager from Wollaston Lake, Denunsala Nation, has been uploading videos of himself playing the guitar.
I am a self-taught musician. I did teach myself over 2 years now.
Before the pandemic, he was attending high school and joined a band as lead guitarist, but that was put on hold. He's now doing online classes and keeping himself busy with music.
It does keep me pretty busy, but we are very far up north. I think we're about 8 to 9 hours north of Prince Albert. So we're pretty far up north. And with kind of uploading videos and teaching myself music, it does keep me pretty preoccupied.
Gazin Larry says he's like any other teenager, and he has struggled with self-confidence. His message to other youth: find something creative.
It's great to have an outlet, like to push yourself into, like, whether it just be punching a punching bag or throwing stuff at a wall or playing music. Little things like those can really help a lot.
He says he keeps pushing himself to learn more and practice his instruments.
I got into playing much more complicated songs. I got into learning guitar solos, teaching myself music theory, which I still am. And then after guitar, I've been getting into playing the drums.
Gazin Larry aspires to one day share his music in public.
I hope to get in front of a crowd. Small, maybe a small stage or big stage. I just hope to get back on stage and play the music I love in front of everybody.
For now, the internet is his big stage. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Canada Post recently unveiled its new Indigenous and Northern Reconciliation Strategy that will improve service to communities in the Northern Territories. Northern communities can expect improvements like new full-service post offices, parcel lockers, and better access to banking services. The Crown Corporation says it will hire more Indigenous workers and will also try to stop the flow of illegal substances like drugs and alcohol.
We have communities in this country that have 3,000 people, 3,000 members, and they've never had a post office. And we've got to ask ourselves why that is. So we're going back and addressing that community by community. We have a great interest across the country to engage that.
While many of us can't be with our families this holiday season, Purolator is trying to make gift giving from afar a little more special this year by collaborating with Canadian artists. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
If you're sending a holiday gift through Purolator, that gift may come in one of these boxes designed by Canadian artists. Purolator and Michaels partnered with 13 artists across the country.
I can't wait for people to put them under the trees and send them out and, connect with their loved ones, even though, not everyone can be together this year, but have a beautiful something to send in the mail.
Patrick Hunter and 3 other Indigenous artists are among those who designed a box to represent their own regions. In Saskatchewan, Chris Morin, Melanie Jewell in the Northwest Territories, and Inuk artist Megan Hunt from Nunavut will all have their work shared across the country. Hunter from Ontario created a floral print.
As gifts, I love to give a lot of mukluks and gloves, and they always have florals on them. A chance to share my culture with more people in Canada and more Canadians to be exposed to Indigenous culture, I think is what, my intention behind my work is all about these days.
The boxes will be available in early December at Purolator shipping centers and at Michaels locations nationwide.
And it's cool just to kind of just highlight that, connection, and it can be done. They're kind of leading the way for other businesses to do, similar collaborations. And me being a gay Indigenous man, I think that said something too, that they're wanting to move forward in really, inclusive ways.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Beautiful artwork. I hope to see one of those boxes under my tree this year. That's your weekend edition of APTN National News. We'll be back here on Monday with more Indigenous news. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brittany Hobson. Have a great evening.